Why else would I be here if I'm not using this role properly to influence and help people where I can? And I like a big challenge. I do like that, but I can't do it on my own.
When a monarch withholds trust, the wound cuts deeper than any crown can heal. Behind closed palace doors, a silent betrayal has left William and Catherine shattered. It began not with an announcement, but with an omission, a decision so subtle in its delivery, yet devastating in its weight. King Charles, in what many believed would be a natural transfer of trust and legacy, chose instead to pause, to withhold the power of the royal warrant from his son and daughter-in-law. For most, royal warrants are distant symbols, ornate certificates bearing a crest, a tradition upheld with quiet dignity. But within the fabric of the monarchy, they are much more. These documents represent more than approval. They signal authority. They crown not just products or services, but people, those considered worthy of carrying the institution forward. And in this moment, that honor was deliberately withheld from the very couple the world believed would inherit the crown's future. The decision wasn't debated in public. There was no royal press release or formal justification. Instead, it happened quietly, discreetly. The power simply wasn't passed down. For William and Catherine, two individuals who have carried themselves with unwavering grace and commitment, this silence wasn't just puzzling, it was wounding. After years of service, poise under pressure, and a growing influence with the public, they had come to represent the monarchy's future. Their elevation in public standing was seen as a precursor to formal empowerment. And yet, when the time came, the throne chose silence. Whispers inside the palace suggest it wasn't a matter of procedure, but perception. That the decision wasn't logistical, but emotional. That behind King Charles's seasoned exterior lay a reluctance, perhaps even fear, of surrendering real control. This wasn't simply about paperwork. It wasn't about tradition. It was about power. The royal warrant, while ceremonial on the surface, is a sword of influence. It determines which businesses rise, which voices carry weight, and who the monarchy officially stands behind. To grant that sword is to admit that the next generation is ready to lead. For William and Catherine, the pause came like an ice wind, unexpected, chilling, and deeply personal. They had stepped into every expectation laid before them. They had endured media firestorms, family estrangement, and the weight of modernizing an ancient institution. They had not faltered, and yet they were told to wait. Without explanation, without clarity, only silence. What made it all the more painful was the moment in which it occurred. King Charles, newly crowned and navigating a nation in transition, had the opportunity to unify, to inspire, to pass the torch with dignity. Instead, he chose caution, cloaked as tradition. The monarch, who had once championed progressive causes, now hesitated to trust his own blood with the very institution he'd spent decades preparing to inherit. But what seemed like a single bureaucratic delay would soon reveal layers of distrust buried beneath royal tradition. It's not just a piece of parchment, it's a kingdom's unspoken trust. And now, William and Catherine are being denied it. For centuries, the royal warrant has stood as one of the most subtle yet potent emblems of monarchical power. To the average eye, it may seem like a ceremonial stamp, a quaint remnant of old-world prestige. But within the British monarchy, this document carries weight far beyond its gold-edged paper. It is influence, sealed, and delivered. The royal warrant grants more than just permission, it confers legacy. It lifts a brand from ordinary to exceptional. And it has the power to shape the future of not just companies, but entire industries. One signature from the monarch or a select group of senior royals can catapult a business into a league of its own. That signature, however, has not come for William and Catherine. King Charles has held this authority since 1980, a privilege passed to him while he was still the Prince of Wales. Over 4 decades, he wielded it with intention, endorsing sustainable brands, small British manufacturers, and long-time royal suppliers. His influence through this single power shaped public taste, elevated craftsmanship, and reinforced the monarchy's ability to quietly steer the nation's commercial identity. The public, royal insiders, and business leaders alike assumed that, as Charles ascended the throne, this responsibility would seamlessly transition to the next in line. That assumption has now collapsed into silence. William and Catherine, poised as the faces of a modernized monarchy, seemed destined to take up this mantle. Their visibility, popularity, and steady image made the case obvious. Catherine's every outfit, every engagement, every carefully worded speech has sent economic ripples around the globe. William, stoic and reliable, has carved a role as a future statesman. They were ready not just to serve but to lead. And yet, the power to formally endorse remains locked away. The monarchy thrives on symbols, and this one cuts deep. Without the authority to issue royal warrants, William and Catherine's influence remains performative. They may smile at ribbon cuttings, attend summits, speak with world leaders, but they cannot wield the institutional pen that shapes royal legacy. Their presence is strong, but their power is not recognized on paper. That divide isn't just philosophical, it's political. It separates participation from control. Businesses that have cultivated ties with the royal couple are now frozen in anticipation. These aren't minor operations hoping for attention, they are heritage brands, charitable organizations, and global enterprises who bet on the future of the monarchy. Many had quietly prepared for the moment William and Catherine would gain the right to grant royal approval. That moment, it seems, has been indefinitely postponed. The effect is a quiet economic paralysis, a vacuum of expectation turning into frustration. When the monarchy hesitates, the ripple touches everyone orbiting its power. Yet beneath the surface, something more unsettling lingers. The denial of the warrant is more than a pause, it is a refusal wrapped in velvet. It raises questions the monarchy does not want to answer. Is it simply tradition holding things back? Or is it a lack of faith in the heirs to the throne? What message does it send when a future king is not entrusted with a tool his father held while still a prince? But this isn't the first time a beloved royal woman has been held back. It's a haunting echo of a story we've heard before. Once again, a Princess of Wales stands admired, yet powerless. The monarchy's pattern repeats itself in whispers and withheld permissions. More than 2 decades ago, Diana captivated the world, not with royal decree or institutional power, but with raw humanity. She didn't need the weight of a crown to command attention. Her touch, her presence, her voice, they all carried a power that transcended protocol. But inside the palace, that same power became a threat. Though Diana was beloved by millions, her reach was kept tightly contained. Behind the palace walls, she was boxed in, celebrated on magazine covers, adored in hospital wings, praised at charity galas, yet never truly entrusted with the tools of monarchy. Among those tools was the Royal Warrant, and despite all her influence, it was never hers to give. The denial wasn't announced. It didn't need to be. It was understood. Diana, even at the height of her popularity, was never allowed to cross the threshold into true institutional authority. The last woman to hold that privilege while serving as Princess of Wales had done so in the early 1900s, more than a century ago. Since then, silence. A royal tradition quietly frozen in time. The role of Princess of Wales became symbolic, elegant, admired, but hollowed of the power it once carried. Diana filled that role with light, but the throne ensured she never wielded it with force. It was a contradiction as sharp as it was cruel. The world bowed to Diana's compassion. She shifted global conversations around AIDS, landmines, and mental health. She embraced the sick, the shunned, the forgotten. She redefined what it meant to serve. But even as the world listened, the palace bristled. Her independence, her spontaneity, her refusal to play by silent rules, they were tolerated, not supported. She became the most photographed woman in the world, yet she remained a figure of ceremonial influence, not structural command. She could change public opinion, but she could not change royal policy, and the absence of real power echoed louder than any headline. This pattern of denial wasn't accidental, it was designed. Built into the royal machine is an unspoken fear that women with vision, presence, and voice might tip the balance of control, that to elevate them fully would be to shift the power dynamic forever. Admiration is permitted, influence through image is allowed, but real authority? That remains hidden behind the curtain. And Diana's story became the most haunting example of this quiet restraint. Even her marriage, her motherhood, and her tragic end did not break the institution's reluctance. If anything, they solidified it. Her legacy was honored, but her autonomy never restored. The royal family praised her memory, spoke of her with reverence, and built public appearances around her legacy. But in practice, they preserved the very systems that confined her. And now, history is repeating. The same pedestal, the same praise, the same silence. A different woman, but the same glass ceiling. Catherine may not speak like Diana. She may move with more caution, more diplomacy, but her fate echoes her predecessors. Admired by millions, elevated in every headline yet still standing outside the doors of real power. And now, that same invisible barrier surrounds Catherine, only this time, the stakes are even higher. She can influence fashion empires overnight, but not even she can sign a royal endorsement. Catherine, Princess of Wales, has built an empire of influence without ever asking for it. With a single appearance, she can cause global stock to vanish from shelves. Designers with no marketing budget become household names simply because she wore their label for an hour. Her signature style, elegant, modest, relatable, has sparked global movements and revived failing brands. Across the fashion world, this phenomenon has a name. It's not a trend. It's not a gimmick. It's a force, the Catherine effect. And yet, for all her economic impact, for all the brands she elevates simply by being seen, she holds no official power to recognize them. No royal endorsement, no warrant, no written authority. Just admiration, applause, and a closed door. Behind that door stands a decision, one made by the very institution she has served with flawless grace. King Charles, who has seen Catherine's meteoric rise, who has witnessed firsthand the credibility she brings to the royal family, remains unmoved. Despite her global appeal and diplomatic presence, he has refused to grant her and William the right to issue royal warrants. It's a move that has baffled those watching closely, not because of its complexity but because of its simplicity. The monarchy thrives on influence. Catherine is influence. And still, that influence remains unofficial. The fashion houses have noticed. So have the small designers, the retailers, the global chains. Each time Catherine wears one of their pieces, the phone lines light up. Orders triple. Websites crash. But there is no royal emblem for them to display. No stamp of formal approval to attach to their windows or packaging. They ride the wave of her visibility, but are denied the legitimacy that a warrant would provide. It's a paradox that feels almost cruel, a blessing without backing, a miracle without a name. And perhaps that's the point. Perhaps the refusal is intentional, because to formally empower Catherine would be to admit something the monarchy isn't ready to face, that the future has already arrived, and it doesn't belong to tradition. It belongs to relatability, to authenticity, to someone like Catherine. King Charles, rooted in an era of formality and hierarchy, may see in her rise not only inspiration but disruption. She represents a quieter form of authority, one that doesn't demand power but earns it naturally. That kind of power can't be controlled, and it terrifies those who were trained to believe control is everything. So the crown hesitates. It praises, but does not promote. It applauds, but does not advance. Catherine remains adored by the world, and sidelined by the very institution she helps uplift. It is a contradiction so stark it leaves allies and admirers wondering what, exactly, the monarchy is waiting for. She has modernized its image without scandal, strengthened its reach without noise, stabilized its future without ever asking for credit. And yet, still she is not trusted with the simplest mark of royal legitimacy. While Catherine turns her restriction into a platform for grace, her husband is left facing a legacy of silence and rising pressure. Loyalty, when not returned, becomes a weight too heavy to carry, and now William stands in a crownless shadow. From the moment he understood who he was, William knew what would be expected of him. Born not just as a son, but as a symbol heir to a centuries-old institution, future king of a kingdom built on legacy and control. Every step he took, every word he spoke, every breath he drew was shaped by the quiet instruction of duty. And for decades, he followed that path with unwavering discipline. He didn't rebel, he didn't retreat. While others broke away, William remained, loyal, constant, controlled. But now, the very system he swore to uphold is testing the limits of that loyalty. Because being prepared is no longer enough. Being admired is no longer enough. The crown he was raised to inherit still refuses to place its full trust in him. The public sees him as the embodiment of stability. They look to him as the calm in the storm, the man who will steady the monarchy in an uncertain future. But behind palace gates, the picture is far more fractured. King Charles, despite acknowledging his son's readiness in public, withholds the power that would confirm it. The right to issue royal warrants is just one example, but it's a powerful one. It's not merely ceremonial, it's symbolic. It's about being seen as more than a placeholder, more than the next in line. It's about being empowered to lead, not just in theory, but in truth. And yet, for reasons that remain cloaked in tradition, William is left waiting. There are no harsh words exchanged, no outright rejections, just silence, delays, a tightening of control that speaks louder than any royal statement. It's a quiet form of exclusion, and it cuts deeper because it's disguised as patience. The longer he waits, the heavier it becomes. The weight of public expectation, the weight of being ready, yet restrained. It's a pressure few can imagine, and even fewer could survive. What complicates it further is the growing distance between father and son. What once felt like shared purpose now feels like careful calculation. The warmth once seen between them has cooled, fewer joint appearances, more behind-the-scenes speculation. Whispers from palace insiders suggest that Charles, though outwardly supportive, still harbors doubts, perhaps not of William's capability, but of how much of himself he's willing to release. The king, even in illness, clings tightly to the reins. And William, despite standing at the center of the royal machine, is still treated like a cog that hasn't quite clicked into place. It's not just an institutional delay, it's deeply personal. Years of preparation, service, diplomacy, all seemingly not enough. The emotional toll of this rejection is written not in speeches or press photos, but in the spaces between, in what isn't said, in the power not granted, in the legacy held just out of reach. And those closest to William are beginning to worry. If the transition of power doesn't happen soon and cleanly, the monarchy risks more than just confusion, it risks collapse. Because you can't lead from the shadows forever, and you can't carry the burden of a throne that never arrives. And as William quietly bears the brunt, another ghost from the past reappears, his fractured bond with Harry. Once united in grief, now separated by silence. Their story began with shared pain and diverged into royal warfare. William and Harry were once inseparable, not just as brothers, but as survivors. They stood shoulder to shoulder through the storm of their parents' fractured marriage and the unimaginable loss of their mother. When Diana died, the world mourned, but those two boys, walking behind her coffin with the eyes of the globe piercing through their pain, carried something far heavier than public sorrow. They carried each other. Their bond, forged in tragedy, became their greatest strength. Through childhood and adolescence, they navigated the unrelenting scrutiny of royal life together. The heir and the spare two halves of a fractured whole leaned on each other in a world that rarely allowed them to simply be sons. In the years that followed, they brought that unity into public service. They launched campaigns together, stood before cameras together, opened hearts and minds around mental health awareness. It wasn't just performative, it was personal. Heads Together wasn't a brand, it was a glimpse into their healing. Together, they made the monarchy feel human again. And for a while, it worked. For a while, the crown seemed less distant. Diana's boys were rebuilding what was lost. But then came the divergence. Slowly, quietly, things began to shift. William began to step into the mold that had been waiting for him since birth. He learned to walk the line, to speak in statements that said little but meant everything. Duty hardened him, made him cautious, made him measured. Meanwhile, Harry began asking different questions. Ones that didn't always have royal answers. He sought a life not defined by titles or tradition, but by identity. His independence wasn't a rebellion, it was a search for meaning in a world that only ever labeled him the spare. This emotional contrast only widened the distance. William stood taller within the institution, while Harry began stepping away from it entirely. Their appearances together became rarer, their smiles more forced, and behind the scenes, the warmth faded. The brothers who once laughed in unison began moving in opposite directions, one into the spotlight of legacy, the other into the shadows of freedom. And in that divergence, something crucial was lost. When Harry finally broke away, it wasn't just a royal scandal. It was an emotional earthquake for William. Because no matter how calm he appeared, no matter how steady his public image remained, the truth was clear. He had just lost his last emotional equal. With their mother long gone, and his father standing atop a throne of distance and doubt, Harry was the last person who truly knew the weight William carried. And now, that person had chosen to leave. William's ascent within the monarchy has come at a cost. His isolation has deepened. The expectations that once felt shared now rest entirely on his shoulders. He is the image of continuity, the face of the future. But behind the controlled expression lies a man quietly abandoned by those who once helped him carry the burden. Harry's departure wasn't just a public fallout, it was a personal fracture. And though William has never spoken the full truth aloud, the silence between them says it all. But even as the brotherly bond fades, William's greatest battle now lies in his father's shifting shadow, and the clock is ticking. He wears the crown, but refuses to let it go. King Charles is a monarch at war with time and with trust. At 76, burdened by illness and the ghost of a legacy not yet fulfilled, King Charles should be the man passing the torch. But instead, he holds it tighter than ever. Cancer has carved a new urgency into his reign, but instead of letting go, he's tightened the grip. Every glance at his heir, every moment where the crown should shift forward, becomes another reason to stall. The monarch who waited a lifetime to ascend now seems terrified of what comes after. And in his fear, he is stalling not just the future, but rewriting the present. What was once whispered behind palace walls is now being debated in public columns. Should Charles step down? Should the monarchy usher in a younger era while the institution still commands respect? The talk of abdication is no longer taboo, but it's not the illness alone driving these questions. It's the choices being made, or rather, not made. The refusal to empower William and Catherine, particularly through the Royal Warrants, has become more than symbolic. It is a declaration, one that speaks not of transition, but of control. And the consequences of that refusal are beginning to unfold. The generational fracture is no longer a quiet tension. It's visible, palpable. The monarchy is built on continuity, on the seamless passing of influence. But Charles, for all his talk of modernization, now stands as the chief obstacle to change. The man who once championed environmental reform and architectural restoration now appears gripped by the most human of instincts, paranoia. Insiders speak of doubt, of a father who watches his son's rising popularity with unease, of a king who sees in William not just a successor, but a potential shadow. And that shadow is growing longer by the day. Charles has built his entire life around the notion of finally becoming king. That moment has come, but instead of finding peace in it, he seems haunted by it. Haunted by the fear that the crown, once handed down, might never shine as brightly on his name as it does on the ones that follow. And so, rather than preparing his son to lead, he withholds. The Royal Warrants, which could have signaled unity and forward motion, now serve as a symbol of hesitation. A power not passed down, a vote of no confidence wrapped in velvet. But hesitation comes at a cost. The monarchy is not immune to perception. When the public sees confusion, it breeds doubt. When they see delay, it sparks unrest. Every moment that Charles stalls deepens the cracks in the institution's foundation. He may think he's preserving power, but in truth, he's dissolving it one quiet refusal at a time. The monarchy was designed to move with grace through generations. Instead, it now limps forward, stuck between a king too wary to yield and a future too ready to wait. But while Charles clings to power, Catherine is crafting a new kind of influence, one that doesn't wait for a royal stamp. She's not waiting for permission. She's building something that may outlast every crown in the kingdom. While the palace debates titles and tradition, Catherine has chosen something far more radical: action. Quietly, deliberately, she has stepped into a form of power that doesn't need coronation or approval. She's not chasing applause. She's rewriting what it means to be royal, not by ceremony, but by consequence. At the center of her revolution lies one cause that most would overlook: early childhood. To some, it might seem small, but Catherine sees it for what it truly is: the origin point of everything, the foundation upon which a nation's future is built. And while others get lost in formality, she's gone straight to the root. Her work through the Royal Foundation's Business Task Force is not symbolic. It's structural, strategic, real. She has brought together companies like IKEA, NatWest, and major supermarkets, not for headlines, but for long-term reform. Her mission? To place childhood development at the forefront of public and private policy. Not as a trend, not as a seasonal talking point, but as a cornerstone of national well-being. What she's crafting isn't just a royal initiative, it's a blueprint. A system that challenges both government and business to rethink how they support families, not in theory, but in boardrooms, in budgets, and in everyday life. This isn't the soft diplomacy of handshakes and photo ops. This is hard, strategic leadership. And she's doing it with no formal authority, no royal warrant, no public decree of power. And yet, she commands rooms, she shifts narratives, she makes headlines not for what she wears, but for what she builds. Catherine has chosen purpose over privilege. And in doing so, she's forcing the monarchy to confront a question it's long avoided. What if real power doesn't come from the crown at all, but from action, from service, from earned influence? Her focus is sharp. She's not trying to be everything. She's not launching dozens of vague causes for attention. She's doubling down on one vision, one that ties education, mental health, economic stability, and long-term societal growth into a single, unified mission. That clarity is rare. It's not flashy, but it's deeply strategic. And it's working. Reports released under her leadership aren't just feel-good PR, they're national wake-up calls. She's showing politicians how to think long-term. She's showing businesses how to be human. And most importantly, she's showing the public that leadership doesn't have to come with a throne to matter. What makes Catherine's movement even more profound is what it challenges within the institution itself. By acting with courage where others hesitate, she's quietly subverting the monarchy's centuries-old model of passive influence. She's turning silence into strategy. She's filling the void left by a cautious king with a kind of authority that no title can bestow earned trust. While Charles hesitates to share power, and William bears the weight of waiting, Catherine is already leading, not with fanfare, not with officialdom, but with focus, with results, with quiet, unstoppable momentum. But as Catherine pushes forward, the monarchy's internal cracks deepen, leading to one final moment of reckoning. The future is standing at the gates, but the crown's silence may cost more than just power, it may cost its people. The British monarchy has always been a symbol of continuity, of poised hands, guiding a nation through centuries of change. But now, those same hands are trembling. The institution stands at a crossroads, where tradition collides with the urgency of evolution. And at the center of this storm are two figures the world has already embraced as leaders, William and Catherine. They have walked the tightrope of royal life with precision, patience, and grace. They've earned the admiration of a weary public, restored faith in a fading institution, and proven, again and again, that they are not only willing but ready to lead. But readiness means little without recognition, and admiration, when met with hesitation, begins to sour. The monarchy's silence, once seen as dignified, now feels like denial. Every moment Charles delays in transferring real power chips away at the very foundation he was entrusted to uphold. Every time a warrant remains unsigned, every role withheld, every right deferred, it sends a dangerous message. That trust is conditional, that loyalty is not enough, and that even the future must beg at the gates of the past. And in a world that now demands clarity, authenticity, and change, this uncertainty breeds not reverence, but resentment. Within palace walls, whispers have turned into warnings, advisors grow restless, allies lose faith. The global stage, once in awe of royal spectacle, is shifting its focus to institutions that act, not just endure. William and Catherine, for all their composure, are trapped in a system that praises their symbolism but stifles their substance. They are expected to lead without authority, to inspire without influence, and that contradiction is becoming harder to ignore. A monarchy that survives on the promise of future generations cannot afford to delay the moment when those generations are allowed to shape it. Every withheld decision deepens the divide, not just between Charles and his heir, but between the institution and the people it claims to serve. If power is hoarded rather than handed down, if trust is withheld rather than invested, the entire structure begins to rot from within. And the damage may be irreversible. Because this isn't just about royal warrants, it's about dignity. It's about belief. It's about whether the crown is capable of becoming more than what it has always been, or whether it will cling to the past so tightly that it erases its own future. There is still time, but not much. The world watches not with admiration now, but with anticipation. And the longer the silence lasts, the louder the question becomes. Will the crown trust the very future it helped shape? Or will it destroy what it refuses to release? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.